Digging up the leads. This is Law and Society. Welcome. Please subscribe. I want to talk to you about a few stories that I think require more public attention. And while people have talked about it, I don't think that they have talked about it enough. And so let's get started on these stories. The first one is the ICE whistleblower that warned about constitutional violations. Mr. Ryan Schwenk testified in a Democratic forum in Congress, where he testified that the United States Department of Homeland Security was training its cadets to violate the law. And it was training its cadets to break and enter into homes without a judicial warrant. The whistleblower, Mr. Schwenk, said that he was instructed of this specifically when he first started his instruction, his teaching, and he was provided this memo, and he was only allowed to read the memo, commit it to memory, and instruct according to it. He wasn't allowed to write down anything from the memo, or he wasn't allowed to keep the memo. And that itself is something that is shady, to put it mildly. And the fact that Mr. Schwenk wasn't allowed to keep a copy, keep a record of this memo that wanted him to teach the cadets that it was lawful to enter people's homes without a judicial warrant, the regime didn't want that to be on the record. They wanted it to be off the record, and we wouldn't know about it if it wasn't for this whistleblower telling us about it. And it is important for us to know what this regime is doing with DHS and ICE, because they are already committing illegal and unconstitutional acts by racially profiling in their administrative stops, by detaining people, kidnapping people, including American citizens, and putting them in concentration camps throughout the United States, and not providing them with due process of law. That is happening as I speak, and that is going to keep happening. And we need to pay attention to what this whistleblower said, because we know that Donald Trump's DHS is violating the Constitution left, right, and center, and we need to stand up about it. The second thing that I want to talk to you about is the hundreds of schoolgirls that were killed in Iran by an American strike. It is important that we keep this message in the news. It's important that we talk about it. It's important that journalists and investigative reporters report on what actually happened and who is at fault. And New York Times came out with a preliminary assessment and analysis that said that it looks like it was American Tomahawk missile that struck the girls' school in Tehran, because it was the targeting was based on outdated information. And so we have to keep up the pressure so we can get to the truth, and we can get our government to acknowledge the truth. Then I want to talk to you briefly about the K-shaped economy. In a K-shaped economy, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. So we pay more for products. Our wages don't get a raise. We remain in the same place financially, but inflation causes prices of things to go up. And the tariffs cause prices of things to go up. And what the companies and the billionaires do is that they pass on that expense on to the consumer, the masses, the regular people. And so they end up making more from the money that is coming up from the tariff dollars. They end up making more, but they're not paying the taxes that they're supposed to be paying. The billionaires aren't, the corporations aren't. Donald Trump made sure of making permanent these tax cuts on the ultra rich. So the American people pay more, they get taxed more. Regular people, they get paid less when they go to work. Inflation causes that money to mean even less. And at the same time, billionaires and corporations rake in the dollars because that's where they get their money from. It is from the American consumer. It is from everyday Americans who are not seeing a raise in their jobs, who are seeing their jobs disappear, who are seeing their basic health care disappear. We're seeing our society being siphoned out, where the masses are becoming poorer and poorer, and a handful of billionaires are getting richer and richer by the day. That's something that we need to keep focus on. That's something that we need to break down and say, no, we need higher wages. We need to bring prices down. We need to get over these tariff debacles that Donald Trump keeps driving us into. And we need to get out of unnecessary wars like the war in Iran that is also contributing to prices going up. Mind you, these prices going up has no impact on these billionaires. And so in a way, this is the billionaires' war, like Dr. Krugman, Paul Krugman talks about, and how it doesn't affect the billionaires. It affects all of us. And in a sense, it is the billionaires who are making these decisions for the rest of us, because it doesn't really impact them on a regular basis in a real way. Then the next story I wanted to talk to you about is the smog of war and how the injuries of our service members and the deaths of our service members are kind of being made to being obscured, so we don't get the full information. So far, we know that 13 American service members have died. 6 in the Kuwait City attack, 6 in the refueling plane crash, and 1 in Saudi Arabia. There are multiple serious injuries that were also part of this report, but we didn't hear about it. The seriousness of the attacks were not reported on initially. The fact that there were several critically injured people, some required amputation, there was brain trauma, there was shrapnel injuries, and the government is not being open and transparent about these attacks. Joni Ernst says, people are split on this, but they understand the threat to the homeland. And if we want to protect Americans here, we have to send our servicemen abroad. And she's one of the more tone-deaf, ridiculous senators, and she's from Iowa, where the first group of service members who were killed are from. And the fact that she says that is just repulsive to me. We have no problem, we as Americans have no problem with having our military in the bases around the world. They're serving their country and that they're doing their jobs. What we have a problem with is Trump endangering their lives by starting unnecessary wars in far-flung locations, far from home. And they're in this interaction of not seeing exactly what is happening, not reporting to the public how many are injured, what conditions they're in, what the real conditions are. This particular regime has put up this transparency mirage, where you give press conferences every day, but you do not talk about anything of substance. Mostly bombastic propaganda. As much as Joint Chiefs of Staff General Kane wants to gives us information, Pete Hegseth turns it into a propaganda blast. When it is talking about the number of deaths, when it is talking about the injuries to our service members, when it's talking about using governmental social media channels to post propaganda and partisan talking points. These things are happening by the Department of Defense as government messages going out to the public. And on one side, they can say, oh, we're being transparent about it, we're telling you this, but there's a whole lot more that they're not telling us about. And so beware of this transparency mirage and pay attention to what information they're not giving us and what information their press conferences provoke. Like, what do we want to know from these press conferences that we are not getting? It's important for us to pay attention and focus on what they're hiding. But that said, thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you soon.